Welcome to the channel. My name is Brady Prenslow and I'm the owner of Prenslow Photography. We are located just north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And last week we kicked off our first high school photo shoot of the season with girls hockey. We did a couple of things that we'd never done before with the Champlin Park Coon Rapids girls hockey team. So this video is going to showcase the multiple lighting setups that we used on the ice, what the images look like right out of camera, and then some of the edits that we made in post. If you are interested in any of those, stick around. This is our third year working with the Champlin Park Coon Rapids girls high school hockey team. And I've been photographing some of these players much longer than that, as we photographed many of the youth leagues in the area as well. The last 2 years, we've shot all of the photos on the ice, the individuals, the small groups, as well as the large groups in lit, but in a natural setting, which made for some beautiful photos, but also added some complexity in post when it came to extracting and creating things like the senior banners, memory mates, and small group composites, and so on. So we changed things up a little bit this year by having two setups with the full team photo on one side and then individuals being shot on gray. And of course, our main objective is always to make parents and players and coaches as proud of these images as possible. But shooting hockey, we understand the value of ice time, so we wanted to get on and off the ice as quickly as possible. And with two setups, it allowed us to be much more flexible. Inevitably, you'll always want to start with the team image and then transition to individuals. But if one player is late, then you have to transition to individuals and go back to the team. So this allowed us to kind of go with the flow. If a player was late, we could start with the individuals and then go to the team and go back and forth. And as far as that go, it worked out really, really well. I also wanted to add some flexibility in post by shooting on gray that would allow us to not only have nice natural looking on ice photos, but make the extraction process a lot easier for things like senior banners, memory mates, and small group composites. So let's start with the team image first. And for the team setup, we used 5 lights. And in those 5 lights, our 2 key lights were 8600s in these 53-inch umbrellas with diffusion, and they were positioned pretty close to the team on either side, pointing at the opposite end of the group. And then for our fill light, I used an 80-1200 with a 7-foot umbrella as well with the diffusion to just fill in any shadows that were created by this cross light setup. We had 2 more 8600 for a total of 5 lights, and the rim lights were in 56-inch strip boxes positioned pretty close to the side that just allowed a little bit of a separation on those side players. Now, this was a relatively new stadium that had much nicer lights than most hockey stadiums in the area. And we could have cranked the natural lights up to 100 and shot very natural, but I actually had the rink manager lower them down to about 20%, which was actually still pretty light, so that we could kill the ambient lights and light the group just based on the strobes alone, which would add more consistency between the group photo and the individual photos, as well as consistency between the girls team and the boys team that we are shooting next week. And as far as posing, we brought in 3 benches for the seniors and goalies up front, and then positioned the shorter players on the second row right behind the bench players, and then brought some smaller stools in for the taller players. And this is always a difficult area for me to balance the technical side of shooting with 5 strobes, as well as the artistic side of positioning this group. It's always nice to have a second set of eyes to make sure that taller players are positioned where they are. But then we brought in the coaches and managers on the side, and for the most part, I'm very happy with the way that this turned out. All the players are well lit. You can see all of their faces. None of them are blinking. Of course, I shot multiple photos, but honestly, almost all of them turned out very well. So now bringing this into Lightroom, into Photoshop, here's what this looks like right out of camera. And the one thing you will always have to battle with when shooting hockey is the reflections from glass, because you're basically surrounded on all sides with glass, which always pose a little bit of a challenge. No matter how high your lights are, what angles your lights are, you always just hope that the glare won't be directly behind an individual. So I spent about 15 minutes on this photo, first kind of bringing it into camera raw and adding just a little bit of additional reflection down below, just sort of increasing the clarity of the ice. And then started using generative fill to remove some of those glares. I removed the clock behind and then the glares, and kind of working my way around the ice so that you can see just removing some of those distractions. I probably could have taken it even further. I added some gradient fill, and then I also took care of some of the orange. That's another thing you need to worry about with the fluorescent lights, because your strobes are going to be at about 5,500 Kelvin, where these are definitely not going to be. So kind of bringing the yellow out of those lights. And then adding, again, a little bit more of a blue tone on the ice to clean it up a little bit, dodging and burning, brightening up some of their faces, and then adding some generative fill on the ice below so that you will have a nice 8x10 or 16x20 photo. So really quickly, before and after, not too much difference, just removing some of those distractions. And then, yes, adding some of the graphics that obviously would be cropped for anything like a program or yearbook. So adding the date and name and so on. And here we have the team photo, which again was shot completely on the ice. Now, right from the team photo, we transition to smaller groups. So here you can see that we are positioning the seniors, and believe it or not, all 3 goalies are seniors, so that made positioning them pretty easily. And I just moved these key lights and fill lights a little bit closer, and I think if I was to do anything else, I would have moved these strip boxes even closer yet, so that it would provide a little bit more separation between the players and the backdrop. But overall, I was pretty happy with the way that these turned out. Bringing it into Lightroom, again, you kind of kill the background a little bit, and all of these players are well lit. I just wish I would have had a little bit additional rim light on either side, but no complaints there. Now moving to the individual setup. And here the individual setup is, again, very close to the large group setup. It allowed me to just very easily go back and forth if needed. And yes, the individual setup also uses 5 lights. This is a very similar setup to what I would use in a normal basketball, baseball, lacrosse, indoor composite shoot. As you can see, they're standing on ice, and I have a key light, which is an AD1200 boomed in a 44-inch ParaSnap softbox with both levels of diffusion. And I have a fill light here in a 44-inch Westcott Umbrella with diffusion. And honestly, this probably was overkill because you're getting so much reflection off of the ice that it's able to fill the players in pretty well. My 2 rim lights are both 8300s as well in 7-foot reflective umbrellas. And then I have 1 hair light boomed above in an AD 300 with a small 22-inch softbox. And yes, this gray backdrop looks extremely high. It's just the way that it was, because typically I have it swept on the ground a little bit longer. But of course I didn't want it draped on the ice, so I actually brought in some yoga mats so that this cloth wasn't laying directly on the wet ice. And then with the only additional thing, I have this laser level. If you're ever in a pinch and you're not able to put foot placements on a field or court, or in this case a rink, I've found that a laser level works pretty well. This green X that it's creating will not show up in photos, and then you can just tell players to step on the X. As far as cameras go, I am shooting with 2 R5s, and the camera below here is a 24 to 105, and I'm shooting as low as I possibly can to allow the players to look tall, and when they turn, then their feet are on the same plane. And I'm also shooting with the second R5 with a 70 to 200 at closer to 200 millimeter for more of a cropped portrait. Both of them are being tethered into Smart Shooter, which does a great job of capturing data as we go forward. So again, we just went back and forth with all of these process, and turning around, you can see here was my team setup. Very closely, I was able to just bounce back and forth. So now, what did these look like in Lightroom? So bringing them into Lightroom, here you have the players on the ice. And the reason I wanted to shoot them on the ice is that you still get this nice, clean, natural looking reflection as they're standing on the ice, but then you are able to very easily extract in the background. So I just made some pretty quick color and sharpening edits in Lightroom before sending them out for extraction. So again, this is what the image looked like straight out of Lightroom. And the reason I was doing this, again, to keep this nice reflection flowing. And then they were sent off for extraction. So if you know anything about extracting, you know that the players will come back without any of this ice. So I created a simple action then to bring back that ice because I shot all the players on a tripod in the same exact position, so that extraction action or the masking action was pretty easy to obtain. And then putting them all on ice, because as a traditionalist, you want your players to actually be on the ice. Looks natural. The big giveaway is always the feet. Here's them on the ice. Here's that a black and white. And as you just saw, then you can do some more fun stuff with a gelled look, kind of a spritz look. And then you've got memory mates that are pretty easy to do, as well as game day photos where you can have multiple images. Both were very easy to extract in this case. More senior banners, simple magnets, some fun graphic images. And then you can have some more enhanced small composites, whether it's individual grades or in this case, captains, that were a lot easier to do in post, having shot on that gray screen. Again, we were very happy with the flexibility that this setup allowed us. Most people would not be able to tell that the natural background was actually not the natural background that we use. So if a very traditional player or parent wanted that natural background, boom, they have it. But then again, you have a very, very clean extraction where each little hair was extracted for the composite images like that. Would I use this setup again? For sure. I know it's very unique. High school hockey, we're able to shoot on the ice. This would never work with the traveling leagues that we use because they would just never allow that much ice time. So with the traveling leagues, we typically shoot sort of shins up and don't have the full body photos because we're shooting off the ice. But for high school, it allows us to do some fun things like this. For the remainder of this video, if you want to see a quick time lapse of what some of the individual and group photo process look like, stick around. And again, thanks for watching. Thanks.